Some invitations arrive cloaked in allure, promising a night of laughter and connection, yet harboring a darkness that lingers just beneath the surface. When I received the embossed card with a single elegant E, my heart raced with anticipation. Ellen DeGeneres was a name synonymous with kindness, her laughter a balm for a weary world. But that night, as I crossed the threshold into her opulent estate, I quickly realized that kindness had a price, and I was about to pay it. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension, and the guests, smiling yet predatory, watched with eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. I stood at the precipice of something unknowable, drink in hand, surrounded by shadows that whispered of a truth I was not yet ready to face. Some invitations arrive in envelopes too ornate to ignore, even when the handwriting is unfamiliar and the sender's name feels like a whisper from a dream. The envelope was heavy, thick paper with an embossed silver seal that read only E. I found it slipped under my apartment door on a rainy Thursday evening, the kind of evening where the city's neon lights blur into a watercolor of lost chances. I stared at it for a long time, heart thrumming with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Ellen DeGeneres was not just a household name. She was a beacon of kindness, laughter, and a rare kind of celebrity warmth that people clung to in a world growing colder. But this invitation, this was something different. It promised access to a secret side of her world, a party so exclusive that rumors about it drifted like smoke among industry insiders, half dreaded and half adored. I'd been chasing the entertainment dream for years, bouncing between dead-end auditions and gigs that barely paid for my ramen noodles. At 27, I was a face in the crowd of hopefuls, invisible but persistent. Ellen's show had been a lighthouse in the fog, a place where laughter wasn't just a defense mechanism but a real currency. To get this invite felt like stepping through a door I'd only glimpsed in passing, a door that might finally lead me into the light. The envelope was thick and cold in my hands, the silver seal catching the dim glow of my kitchen lamp as if it held some secret power. Inside was a single card, black velvet with silver lettering. You are invited. Saturday night, 9 p.m. The estate. That was it. No address, no instructions, just the words and a date. The mystery gnawed at me. I called everyone I knew. Agents, fellow actors, even baristas who worked on the lot, and no one had ever heard of this party. It wasn't on any calendar, no social media whispers, no gossip columns. It was as if the invitation came from a place outside the public realm, a hidden slice of the world where Ellen's kindness was more than a brand. It was a secret, a ritual. Saturday arrived with the kind of tension that makes your skin itch and your palms sweat. I dressed carefully, choosing a suit that felt like armor but not too formal, the kind of outfit that says, I belong, but I'm still me. The city was slick with rain, streets shimmering with reflections of streetlights, and the occasional cab splashing through puddles. The address came in a text, sent just minutes before departure. No sender name, only coordinates that led me out of downtown LA and into the hills, where the streetlights thinned until there was only moonlight and the flicker of distant stars. The car was waiting, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows that swallowed the city's glow. The driver said nothing, eyes forward, as we wound up a narrow road lined with towering oaks and ancient pines. The air grew cooler, the silence heavier, and then, just as the moon slipped behind a cloud, a massive iron gate appeared, flanked by stone pillars carved with strange symbols that looked almost like ancient runes but were disturbingly modern in their precision. The gate opened without a sound, and we rolled inside. The estate was a sprawling mansion, more palace than house, lit with soft golden hues that made the white stone gleam like ivory. The lawn was immaculately manicured, the garden sculpted into shapes that felt both beautiful and unsettling. Topiary animals frozen in mid-leap, hedges trimmed into sharp angles that caught shadows like traps. There was a silence that wasn't peaceful. It was expectant, like the breath held before a scream. As I stepped out of the car, the heavy air seemed to pulse around me, and I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how alone I was in this strange, perfect place. I was greeted by a butler who moved with a quiet grace, his eyes dark pools of unreadable emotion. He took my invitation card, inspected it as if it contained a secret code, then nodded and led me through a massive door that swung open into a grand hallway. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and something metallic, like the scent of old money mixed with the sharp tang of something hidden beneath the surface. The walls were lined with portraits, faces staring down at me. Some familiar celebrities rendered in hyper-realistic oil, others unknown but watching with glassy eyes that seemed to follow every step. The hallway opened into a ballroom, vast and opulent, crystal chandeliers dripping light over polished marble floors. But the room was strangely empty. A few guests milled about near the edges, all dressed in fine black tie, their smiles wide but their eyes too sharp, too knowing. They spoke quietly in clusters, their laughter too high-pitched, their movements too measured, like actors playing roles in a play where they knew the ending but refused to admit it. I tried to catch Ellen's eye, hoping for a welcoming smile, but she was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the host was a woman in a shimmering silver dress, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun, who introduced herself as Marla, Ellen's longtime assistant. Her voice was smooth, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ellen will join us shortly," she said, her tone like velvet over steel. "For now, enjoy the evening. You're among friends." I nodded, but the words felt hollow. I wandered the edges of the room, watching the other guests. They were famous faces, yes. Actors, writers, producers, but something about the way they carried themselves set them apart from the usual Hollywood crowd. They didn't just move through the room. They owned it, as if they belonged to a secret club that I had just barely been invited into. Their smiles were too perfect, their laughter rehearsed. Each glance they gave me was loaded with meaning, a silent test. I felt like a newcomer trying to memorize the rules of a game I didn't understand. The music started then, a soft classical string quartet playing a melody that was at once beautiful and unsettling, like a lullaby sung in a minor key. I drifted closer to the center of the room, where a raised platform held an ornate podium carved with the same strange symbols I'd seen on the gate. The guests began to gather there, forming a circle that closed around the empty podium. The air thickened, the temperature dropping just a fraction. I shivered despite myself. And then I saw her. Ellen entered quietly, without fanfare, her presence commanding the room in a way that was both magnetic and chilling. She wore a simple black dress, elegant and understated, but her smile was sharp, almost predatory. She moved with the grace of someone who knew every inch of this estate, every secret it held. As she reached the podium, the room fell silent. The guests' eyes locked on her like worshippers waiting for a sermon. "Welcome," she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge that made the hairs on my neck stand up. "Tonight is special. Tonight we celebrate not just success, but the power of kindness. The kind that binds us, the kind that opens doors no one else can see." Her gaze swept the room, lingering on me just long enough to make me feel like the only person in the world. I swallowed, caught between awe and something darker, something that whispered beneath the surface of her words. This wasn't just a party. It was an initiation, and somehow I was already on the threshold. The moment Ellen's eyes met mine, an electric charge seemed to hum through the room, but it wasn't warmth. It was something colder, something precise, like the sharp edge of a blade hidden beneath a velvet glove. The guests around me suddenly shifted, their wide smiles stretching even further, revealing teeth that gleamed unnaturally in the soft chandelier light. Their laughter swelled, too loud and too forced, echoing off the marble walls like a distorted symphony. I tried to steady my breath, but the air seemed thick with expectation and something else, something I couldn't quite name. The circle around the podium tightened as Ellen's voice lowered, her words weaving through the room with hypnotic ease. "Kindness," she said, "is more than a gesture. It is a currency, a covenant. Here, kindness opens doors, but it also demands loyalty." Her smile never faltered, but her eyes glinted with a secret I was only beginning to glimpse. The guests nodded in unison, their faces masks of devotion. The atmosphere was electric, charged by a silent agreement that felt both sacred and sinister. I edged closer to a cluster of guests standing near a towering window that framed the moonlit garden beyond. Their voices were low, almost conspiratorial, but I caught fragments that made my stomach twist. Vanished after crossing her. One whispered, eyes flicking nervously toward Ellen. Another replied, "You don't refuse her kindness. You don't say no." The phrase hung in the air like a warning. I swallowed hard, pretending to inspect the intricate patterns on the marble floor while my mind spun. The guests' behavior was increasingly unsettling. Smiles never faded, but their eyes held something unnatural, sharp, calculating, almost hungry. One man laughed suddenly, too loud, his head thrown back in a way that seemed more performance than joy. Shadows clung to the corners of the room, long and restless, flickering as if alive. I caught my reflection in a gilded mirror nearby, but the image that returned was off. My eyes looked too wide, my smile too forced, as if the glass was warping not just my face but my very soul. I tried to focus on the music, the quartet strings weaving a melody that should have been comforting, but the notes twisted into minor chords that sent shivers down my spine. The shadows behind the musicians seemed to sway independently of their movements, stretching and contracting like dark tendrils seeking something beyond the light. Ellen moved through the crowd with the grace of a predator, her presence commanding attention without effort. She stopped beside a woman in a crimson gown whose laughter faltered when Ellen's gaze fell upon her. The woman's eyes darted away, and I caught a glimpse of something dark flickering beneath her skin, like a shadow passing just beneath the surface of her smile. Ellen's hand brushed the woman's arm, fingers cold as ice, and the woman immediately straightened, her smile returning but her eyes hollow. A waiter appeared, offering silver trays filled with crystal glasses of a shimmering amber liquid. Ellen raised her own glass, her eyes never leaving mine. "Drink," she said softly, "and join us fully." The liquid caught the light, glowing invitingly, but a warning echoed in my mind. The phrase from earlier, "You don't say no." I hesitated, feeling the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. The room seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, each beat a countdown. I noticed a young man near the back, a writer I recognized from a late-night comedy show. He was clutching his glass tightly, eyes darting nervously as if caught in a trap. I tried to catch his gaze, but he blinked rapidly, turning away before I could speak. A chill crawled up my spine. I wanted to warn him, but the words caught in my throat. Another guest, an older gentleman with silver hair and a practiced smile, sidled up beside me, voice low and smooth. "Careful with that cup," he murmured, nodding toward the tray. "It's more than it seems. Once you drink, there's no taking it back." His eyes flicked toward Ellen, who was now standing at the center of the room, a silent conductor orchestrating the room's unspoken rituals. As I stood frozen, the music shifted. The quartet's melody slowed, the notes dragging, heavy and deliberate. The room's lighting dimmed imperceptibly, shadows deepening until the edges of the room seemed to dissolve into darkness. A low murmur rose from the guests, a chant barely audible at first but growing steadily. The words were foreign, ancient-sounding, and they wrapped around me like a tightening noose. I tried to speak, to move, but found myself rooted to the spot. The air grew colder, breath visible in the sudden chill. The portraits lining the hallway seemed to peer inward, their eyes glinting with a life of their own. I glanced at my reflection again. This time, my image blinked before I did, a slow, deliberate mimicry that sent a jolt through me. Ellen's voice cut through the chant, clear and commanding. "We are bound by kindness, by loyalty, by the promise we keep to one another." Her smile widened, but it was no longer warm. It was a seal, a statement of possession. The guests echoed her words, their voices blending into a chilling harmony. A sudden movement caught my eye. Near the grand staircase, a young woman in a pale blue dress whispered urgently to a man who responded with a grim shake of his head. Their conversation was inaudible, but the fear etched on their faces was unmistakable. I felt a pang of sympathy and fear. This party was a gilded cage, and the locks were invisible. I moved toward the exit, heart pounding, but Marla appeared beside me, her expression unreadable. "The evening is just beginning," she said smoothly. "There's much to learn, and many to meet. You're safe here, if you choose to be. Her words felt like a challenge wrapped in a promise. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my mind raced. This wasn't the kindness I'd imagined. It was a performance, a ritual, a trap dressed in laughter and light. The guests' eyes followed me as I circled the room, their smiles never faltering, their words hollow and rehearsed. I caught snippets of conversations, mentions of contracts, loyalty, eternal gratitude, all spoken in tones that were too practiced, too rehearsed. The final straw came when I caught sight of a man who had been standing near the bar moments before. Now he was gone. No one mentioned it, no one seemed to notice. His absence was a cold, empty space in the room's carefully maintained illusion. I asked a nearby guest, who smiled tightly and said, "He moved on. We all do, eventually." The phrase echoed in my mind, chilling and absolute. I wasn't sure if it was a warning or a promise. The party's veneer cracked, revealing the undercurrent of something darker, something eternal. Ellen's kindness was a currency, but the price was more than I had imagined. As the night deepened, I realized this was no ordinary gathering. It was a test, a binding, a silent agreement whispered in the language of shadows and smiles. I was a guest on the surface, but beneath I was something else. A player in a game where the stakes were far higher than fame or fortune. And the rules were clear: you don't say no. The moment came without warning. Ellen's voice rose above the murmurs and the fading song of the quartet, sharp and clear as a bell slicing through fog. "Follow me," she commanded softly, yet the words carried the weight of an edict. The guests parted like a sea opening, revealing a narrow corridor I had not seen before, its walls lined with heavy velvet drapes and dim sconces casting flickering amber light. My heart hammered in my chest, part fear, part reckless curiosity. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the unseen door opening at last, but I felt the cold fingers of doubt wrapping around my spine. I followed Ellen through the corridor, the other guests trailing behind in a solemn procession. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if the very atmosphere were steeped in secrets too old to name. At the end of the hall, an unmarked door waited, its surface carved with the same cryptic symbols I'd noticed earlier. Runes that seemed to pulse faintly with an inner glow. Ellen reached out, her fingers brushing the wood, and it swung open silently to reveal a room bathed in candlelight, the flickering flames casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Inside, a semicircle of chairs faced an imposing table made of dark mahogany, polished to a mirror finish. Upon it rested a stack of parchment, rolled and tied with black silk ribbons, and an ornate quill that seemed almost alive, its feathers shimmering unnaturally in the candlelight. The guests took their seats without hesitation, their faces masks of solemn devotion. Ellen gestured for me to sit, her eyes piercing, holding a challenge I could neither ignore nor fully comprehend. "This," she began, her voice low and hypnotic, "is the covenant of kindness, a promise that binds us not just in friendship, but in eternity. To sign is to accept the gifts of fortune, fame, and favor, but it is also to surrender a part of yourself, to join a family that transcends time." The parchment was laid before me, the ink shimmering as if alive, the words written in a language that twisted and shifted beneath my gaze. I reached out, fingers trembling, but the moment my skin brushed the paper, a vision exploded behind my eyes, a torrent of images, feelings, and voices that overwhelmed me. I saw myself, faceless and drifting through endless halls, a ghost among shadows, my identity dissolving into an eternal echo. I felt fear, loss, and a cold emptiness that clawed at my soul. The vision shattered as quickly as it came, leaving me gasping for breath, heart pounding in a frantic rhythm. Ellen's gaze held me steady. "It is not a cage, but a sanctuary," she said softly. "A place where kindness is currency and loyalty is life. But the choice is yours. To sign is to belong. To refuse is to walk away alone." The room seemed to close in around me, the candle flames flickering violently, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. The guests watched intently, their faces serene but their eyes burning with expectation. The quill hovered before me, an invitation and a threat entwined. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision crush down like a mountain. The promises of fame and favor whispered seductively at the edges of my mind. But the vision lingered, a haunting reminder of what I might lose. My fingers trembled as I reached for the quill, the room holding its breath with me. Suddenly, a sound shattered the silence. A sharp, stifled cry from the far corner of the room. Heads turned, and I saw the young man from the comedy show clutching his chest, eyes wide with terror. His face twisted in pain, and before anyone could react, he collapsed to the floor, limbs twitching. Panic erupted, but Ellen's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Calm," she commanded, stepping forward with a grace that belied the tension. She knelt beside him, placing a hand on his forehead. The twitching slowed, his breathing steadied, and within moments he opened his eyes, glazed but alive. "He chose to refuse," Ellen said quietly, standing and locking eyes with me. "There is a price for walking away." Fear slammed into me like a tidal wave. The room's comforting facade shattered, revealing the razor-thin line between kindness and captivity. The guests' serene masks slipped, revealing faces twisted with something darker: desperation, hunger, fear disguised as devotion. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I won't sign," I said, voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I won't trade my soul for a promise." A silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Ellen's smile sharpened, her eyes narrowing to slits. "So be it," she said softly, almost regretfully. "But know this, once you cross this threshold, there is no simple retreat." The guests rose as one, closing in around me, their movements fluid and purposeful. The room seemed to pulse with energy, a low hum vibrating through the floor and walls. Shadows stretched and twisted, reaching toward me like dark fingers seeking to bind. I pushed past them, heart pounding, lungs burning with the cold air of desperation. The door slammed behind me, sealing the room in darkness and silence. I ran down the corridor, the velvet drapes now suffocating, the sconces flickering erratically. The mansion's halls twisted in impossible ways, corridors looping back on themselves, staircases leading nowhere. Behind me, faint footsteps echoed, relentless and unyielding. I dared not look back, fearing what I might see. A host of shadowed figures, their eyes glowing with that same unnatural hunger. I burst through a door into the grand ballroom, now transformed. The chandelier's light flickered madly, casting erratic shadows that leapt and danced like demons freed from chains. The guests who had once smiled now wore faces twisted with rage and despair, their laughter replaced by guttural growls and whispered threats. I sprinted toward the exit, only to find the doors locked, the heavy iron bars gleaming coldly in the dim light. Panic clawed at my chest as I searched for another way out, heart slamming against my ribs like a caged animal. In the chaos, I caught sight of Ellen, standing at the center of the room, her form shifting between the woman I had admired and something far more sinister. A dark queen reigning over her haunted court. Her smile was a slash of white teeth in the gloom, eyes gleaming with triumph. "We all give in," she whispered, voice echoing through the chamber like a curse. Desperation fueled my limbs. I spotted a side door ajar and dove through it, crashing into a cold stone hallway. The mansion's maze seemed endless, but I ran blindly, driven by the primal urge to escape. The night air was a balm when I burst through a side exit into the garden. Cold rain had begun to fall, soaking through my clothes, but I didn't care. I ran until the mansion was a distant silhouette against the stormy sky. Breath ragged, heart still racing, I knew I had escaped. For now. But the shadows of that night clung to me, a haunting reminder of the cost of refusal, and a warning that the invitation was far from over. I didn't stop running until the mansion was swallowed by the night, the cold rain soaking through my clothes, chilling me to the bone. The city streets felt alien beneath my feet, familiar yet distant, as if I'd crossed into a shadow world that no longer belonged to me. I knew, deep down, that I had escaped the estate's grasp, but the price was just beginning to reveal itself. The following morning, I woke in a cheap motel on the edge of town, sweat chilling in the drafty room. My phone buzzed relentlessly, but no contact was from friends or agents. Instead, it was silence from the people I'd known, the ones who should have answered my calls, replied to texts, returned messages. It was as if I'd disappeared from their lives overnight. I tried to reach out, desperate to explain, to anchor myself back to reality. But the void on the other end of every line was deafening. Days slipped by in a haze of anxiety. I watched my reflection more often, half expecting to catch glimpses of the shadows that had haunted the estate. At times, I thought I saw fleeting figures lurking just out of sight. In mirrors, in the shiny surface of my laptop, in the darkened corners of my apartment. Each time I blinked, they vanished, leaving a cold residue of dread behind. Then the whispers began. At first, they were faint, like a breeze stirring the curtains. I heard my name spoken in hushed tones, unintelligible but persistent. Shadows shifted in the periphery of my vision, and I found myself looking over my shoulder more than once, heart hammering against my ribs. The kindness Ellen had promised felt like a curse. A tether I hadn't realized was wrapped tightly around my soul. The industry, once a landscape of endless possibilities, now felt like a minefield. My name was absent from casting calls and writers' rooms. Emails went unanswered. Opportunities evaporated. It was as if I had been erased, not just from the party, but from the very world I'd struggled to enter. One evening, desperate and defeated, I wandered into a rundown cafe, the neon sign flickering above the door like a warning. The place was half empty, the air thick with cigarette smoke and quiet despair. I slid onto a stool at the bar, nursing a bitter coffee, when a homeless man shuffled over, his eyes bright with unsettling clarity. "You still say no?" he rasped, voice low and urgent. "They don't forget. They don't forgive." I stared at him, heart skipping. The phrase echoed in my mind, those same words I'd overheard whispered near the mansion. Who don't forget?" I asked, voice cracking. He smiled, a grim, knowing smile that revealed stained teeth. "The ones who give in. They shine but they hollow out. The ones who say no, they watch and they wait. But the price is never gone." I wanted to walk away, to dismiss the man as a cracked messenger of some cruel joke. But something in his eyes held me in place. The city outside felt colder, harsher. The ground beneath my feet less certain. In the weeks that followed, I saw the pattern. Those who had accepted the invitation, the ones who gave in, were glossy and flawless, their success effortless and unassailable. But behind their smiles was a hollowness, a flicker of something lost. They seemed to move through the world like shadows of themselves, their kindness a mask for a deeper hunger. Meanwhile, I was left to navigate a labyrinth of silence and suspicion. I tried to write, but the words came haltingly, as if the story I wanted to tell was tangled in invisible chains. The chant from the mansion echoed in my mind, a relentless refrain. "We are bound. We are kind. We all give in." I began to doubt my own sanity. Was this real? Had I been punished for refusing? Or was I just unraveling, a casualty of exhaustion and fear? The line between nightmare and reality blurred until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. One night, as I lay awake, a shadow moved across my ceiling, flickering like a flame in the darkness. I blinked, and the whisper came again, softer this time, almost a sigh. "We all give in." The phrase settled into my bones, a chilling lullaby that promised there was no escaping the mansion's reach. Ellen's kindness was a hunger, and it was always waiting, always watching. I wanted to reach out to find others like me, but the silence was absolute. The industry's glittering facade concealed a network of shadows, and I was a ghost trapped between worlds. The strike by the Writers' Guild only deepened the void. Doors closed, rooms emptied, and the world I'd fought to enter seemed to crumble beneath my feet. I was left adrift, a whisper of a promise that had never been meant to be kept. And in the quiet moments, when the city slept and the darkness thickened, I wondered if I had made a choice or if the choice had been made for me. The invitation was gone, but its weight remained, pressing down like a secret too terrible to share. Somewhere, out there, the party continued, silent, eternal, a gathering of smiles and shadows, where kindness was currency and loyalty was life. And I was left on the outside, watching, waiting, haunted by the knowledge that the night had not finished with me. The mansion's doors may have closed behind me, but its echoes never faded. Each day was a battle between hope and dread, between the light I chased and the darkness that still whispered my name. I was no longer just a hopeful face in the crowd. I was a question, a warning, a ghost of kindness lost. And the shadows were patient. Weeks had passed since the mansion faded into the mist behind me, but the weight of that night had only grown heavier. The silence from my contacts, the empty inboxes, the cold stares from strangers. It all pressed down like a shroud, but nothing prepared me for what arrived one morning at my doorstep. A plain, unmarked box sat waiting, its surface rough and cold to the touch. No return address, no note, just the box. I hesitated, fingers trembling as I peeled back the tape. Inside lay a porcelain teacup, delicate and gleaming white, its surface inscribed with silver lettering, "Be kind and give in." The phrase was a ghost of the chant I'd heard echoing in the mansion's halls, a cruel reminder of the choice I had refused to make. I held the cup in my hands, heart pounding as memories flooded back. The candlelit room, the quill hovering before me, Ellen's smile sharp as a blade. I wanted to smash the cup, to shatter it into shards and bury the pieces deep where no one could find them. But something held me back, a morbid curiosity mingling with dread. What if this was more than a symbol? What if it was a key or a warning or a trap? The next day, the silence was broken by another package. This time, a single matchstick lay nestled inside, alongside a small, folded note that read simply, "Burn it if you're sure." The handwriting was elegant, familiar, the same precise script that had adorned my original invitation. I sat alone, staring at the matchstick and the cup, the room thick with the scent of rain and old paper. The choice felt impossibly heavy. To burn the cup was to reject the invitation once and for all, to sever whatever tether remained. But what if burning it summoned something worse? What if destruction only deepened the bond? Sleep brought no relief. The dreams returned, vivid and haunting. I was back in the mansion's candlelit room, quill poised in hand, faces watching, waiting. Ellen's voice whispered through the darkness, a lullaby and a curse intertwined. "We all give in." The chant echoed, growing louder, drowning out reason. I woke gasping, sweat cold on my skin, heart still racing. The line between nightmare and waking blurred, and the cup rested on my bedside table, gleaming innocently in the dawn light. Days later, I found myself walking the city streets with a restless energy, eyes scanning the crowds for signs, for answers, for escape. The world felt both the same and utterly changed, as if I were moving through a veil that separated the ordinary from the unseen. I wondered, sometimes bitterly, what might have happened if I had said yes. If I had dipped the quill in ink and signed that cursed parchment. Would I have been lost forever in the mansion's eternal twilight, a ghost among shadows? Or would I have found something else, power, purpose, belonging? Ellen's kindness was a riddle, a hunger cloaked in smiles and light. It promised everything but demanded more than I could give. I was left with the question, the memory, and the fragile porcelain cup that whispered secrets I dared not speak aloud. The invitation lingered at the edges of my life, a shadow that neither welcomed nor released me. I knew other packages might come, other choices might be forced. The mansion's reach was long, its patience endless. Some nights, when the city's noise falls away and the darkness deepens, I hear the chant again, a soft, relentless murmur that threads through my dreams and waking hours alike. Be kind, give in, and I wonder if one day I will. Until then, I carry the cup like a talisman and a warning, a reminder that some doors, once opened, never truly close. Ellen's kindness isn't just a gift. It's a hunger, a question, a shadow that follows me still.